Very warm welcome to everybody joining us here today for our Lunch and Learn series of webinars. It's great to have so many of you here, and some faces I know and some faces I knew, so I'd like to be able to chat and say hello. I see Haven there. I haven't spoken to Haven for a long while, so it's lovely to see you.
Hi, Ethan.
You're good to hear your voice. And it's great to be able to introduce today our colleagues from Penna. I've got the fabulous Julie Towers, Managing Director, and Kris Phelps, the Diversity and Inclusion Manager. And Penna have been great supporters and partners with PPMA for many years. They're one of our key pillars of being able to bring new thinking and current thinking to HR and OD professionals. And today, on the back of their first session that they ran for us, couple of weeks ago, this issue emerged in terms of diversity and inclusion, utilizing technology, and what is it, if anything, that's starting to kind of come about from our work and world now, which is more heavily dominated by technology. So hence the session today. We've got a chat facility, so please feel free to post your questions and I'll pick those up with Julie and Kris at the end of their kind of talk, and anything which emerges throughout the session, it would be great to hear from you. So that's it from me. Just make sure that you've got your mics switched off if you would be so kind. It's gorgeous to see your faces on the screen, so feel free to have your video switched on. And I look forward to hearing what Julie and Kris have to say. I'm going to hand over to Kris first off.
Hi, good morning everyone. Yes, as I've just been introduced, thank you Lethem. I'm Kris Phelps, Diversity Inclusion Manager here at Penna. So I'm going to be with you for the webinar, and I'm going to speak for about sort of 10 minutes about some of my thoughts around how the D&I agenda can continue to progress during COVID-19, and also share with you some stats and some research that I've been a part of, particularly aimed at D&I managers. But before we progress, I'd like to make aware that it is Mental Health Awareness Week. So if you haven't already, please do take some time today to check in with yourselves and with your loved ones to make sure you're feeling okay. And after this, I'm doing a mental health awareness webinar with my colleagues at Penna. So it's very, very topical to me, and I thought I'd start off with that. So for me, as a D&I practitioner, and I've done D&I now for sort of 10 years, I think what COVID-19 has shown us is that the need for D&I has not gone away. In fact, it's really highlighted some of the inequalities that individuals face within society and within certain sectors. We see too often on the news that BAME individuals are disproportionately affected by the effects of COVID-19 and frontline workers. If we look at the population of frontline workers, in London alone, 67% of adult social care workers are from a BAME background. So for me, D&I fundamentally should be at the top of the agenda, not only for us as individuals, but for the organisations that we work with. I'm very fortunate enough to be part of a D&I practitioners forum called D&I Leaders. And they conducted some research at the start of lockdown. It was the first week of April, to ask our thoughts and feelings about how we felt as a community, how our organisations were responding and reacting to D&I initiatives. And it came out with some pretty interesting stats, some of it positive and some of it not so much, and I'll go through that. But at the time, 84% of respondents, of which there were 156, said that their organisation, in supporting colleagues, had done so in an inclusive way. We'd seen at the very start, and I think it's tailed off somewhat now for some organisations, but at the very start we saw consistent messages from senior leaders. I know at Penna it was great to be able to see Julie's face every week, where she gave us an update of what was happening within the organisation, our plans and visions for the future. And we also saw that across other industries. Some went as far as guaranteeing no staff redundancies for 3 months to put people's minds at ease. And importantly, we saw the sharing of personal stories on how colleagues were coping with being in lockdown. And we saw signposting to support. 91% said that their future ways of working will fundamentally change during and after COVID-19. And their core focuses were on recruitment, communication, and job design. And I'll go through some of my thoughts and feelings on that shortly. We were asked as a community to think of the opportunities that can arise during this time And I've picked out a few. There were a lot. There were about 35 opportunities listed, but I picked out the few that really resonated with me and hopefully starts to provoke some of our thought process when we align D&I with COVID and importantly beyond. The first was pushing mental health to the top of the agenda. I think we can all agree that we've never experienced something like this, and we're doing it all together. And I know that mental health is often on the agenda for organisations, but there's a worry about discussing it. There's a concern sometimes of the individual's ability to cope with their job if they announce that they have mental health conditions or they're affected by mental health. And this really is an opportunity to put that condition and put that agenda right at the very top, because we've seen that organisations are promoting and supporting mental health awareness. And we've also seen that the stats show us that there's been an increase in mental health services. People are calling Mind a lot more, they're calling Samaritans a lot more. So they saw this as an opportunity to really put that forefront and centre. The next, and this resonates with me, was more inclusion thanks to remote events. And initially that can sound quite counterintuitive. How do we include people remotely? But we've got the opportunity now of more people joining events remotely. And I've noticed that with the training that I've given, both to clients and internally, that we've seen an increase of people attending. Because when we're in the office, it's too easy to get caught up in meetings, it's too easy for conference calls to run on. But now we're in a position where we're doing this from the comfort of our own homes. We, as individuals, seem to be a bit more inquisitive. Now, that might be because we miss our colleagues and we're not seeing them as often, so we want to be part of something. But also it allows us to take the time that we may have wanted to develop in ourselves, but unable to do so within the office. I think if there's one thing for me, it's the education of managers on diversity and inclusion is fundamental during this time. Now, we hear people discussing that we're in the same boat, and I somewhat disagree with that because people's boats are different, right? Some of us are really privileged to be able to work at home and feel comfortable, to feel secure, to have a space where we have a home working space where I can speak to you without distractions. But also we must understand that some people don't, and that they have been forced into their home and it may be unsafe for them. We've seen an increase in domestic abuse, unfortunately. So as organisations, what can we do to, one, empower our staff to speak up and support them, and two, educate our line managers on diversity and inclusion? Because for the first time during my professional life, we're in the same place, and people can start to align their thoughts with being in the same predicament. Senior leaders will start to understand the importance of flexible working. Now, if we look back before this, I think sometimes flexible working was seen as a bit of a perk. It was, put in job descriptions to attract often what we thought would be female or disabled candidates. But flexible working is no longer just being able to work from your kitchen desk like I am. It's more about ensuring that we push further than that into the ways in which we work, the hours in which we work, and the way that we promote work and the way that we manage individuals. What we've gone now is from senior leaders maybe untrusting of flexible working or their population working from home to having no other choice but to embrace it. And then on the whole, most organisations are succeeding. Another big opportunity was more women in the workplace thanks to greater acceptance of flexible working. And again, I agree with that, but it's not going to happen straight away. By moving your workplace virtually, you're not all of a sudden going to see an increase in female applications or female appointments. What we must do as D&I practitioners and HR practitioners is to review how roles are completed and how we can embrace them truly to be flexible. We know that childcare disproportionately falls onto women, and this is an opportunity that has allowed senior males, for example, and the male population as a whole really, to understand the importance of flexible working. It also is an opportunity for us to ensure that childcare is disbanded across both the male and female population. We know from research that women are less likely to speak up in meetings. So how do we accommodate that requirement when we work flexibly and we work remotely? There were some concerns out of the research. 4 in 10 said that they were worried that D&I would fall off the radar. And I would hope that that doesn't happen. McKinsey, as always, produce reports around why diversity is important, and they've just released the latest round of research, Diversity Wins. And I'm not going to bore you, we know that the more diverse an organisation, the more inclusive, the more profitable. But this year they've gone as far to categorise their organisations. At the very top we have diversity leaders, then fast movers, moderate movers, and companies just resting on laurels. So I have two questions. One is, where are you in your organisation and where do you want to be? Do you see yourself as moderate movers? You've made some progressions, but others are slow. Or do you see yourself as resting on your laurels? And what I will often do when working with organisations is ask them two questions. Is diversity and inclusion embedded into process and people? Have you gone as far to redesign jobs that accommodate people with disabilities? We know too well that by moving meetings virtually, there was a lack of accessibility tools on virtual engagements, subtitles, for example, being able to read the room. How do individuals understand when to speak up and when not to? And the second is really important for me, working within the recruitment industry, is, are your hiring managers aligned to your D&I mission? Do they see themselves as influencers in this space? And do they understand the role that they play? Because for me, moving to digital is only half the battle, and we need to ensure that biases aren't at play. So please do ensure that your staff have access to unconscious bias, but we may want to change that conversation to make it specifically about virtual inclusive training. I'll hand over to Julie now. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't like being able to be muted by other people, just generally. Thank you, Kris. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. I just thought I'd add a little bit to a session I ran with Leitham a few weeks ago, where I made the bold claim that as a recruiter, I think virtual recruitment and online recruitment adds way more to the diversity and inclusion agenda than face-to-face ever did. A bold statement, I know to say, but born out of two things. One, we have moved online. We've had the ability and the technology to do this for a long time. We all know that. We've been on Teams at Penna for 2 years. So we've had the technology, but culturally we've preferred, and why wouldn't we prefer, to meet people face-to-face through the recruitment process. After all, it's people we work with and people that create the innovation and output for our organisations. But it's not been the preference. But here we are in COVID, and we're nearly at 45 appointments fully online at Penna. We'll be running a webinar on the 18th of June called Recruited in Lockdown, and we're delighted that our hiring managers and our candidates are going to join us, and I hope you will too, for an interesting discussion about the strengths and deficits of the online recruitment and onboarding process. But my observations as a recruiter in sitting in on those initial interviews, assessments, and interactive assessments, partner panels, and final interviews, is that online brings about an objectivity and a clarity that we often don't get, however much we try, in an interactive live interview. Candidates have said things like, I felt less nervous because I wasn't walking into a room of white people, a BAME candidate said to me. A disabled candidate said, my physical disability was less obvious because everybody's heads and shoulders were on show. And female candidates have particularly said that actually being able to be in their own surroundings and show their childcare or other caring responsibilities has been a positive, and they felt it's been a really great experience to be able to be themselves and be authentic, because everybody is in their bedroom or kitchen with children running around and dogs barking, etc. And these are really powerful statements to me as a recruiter that people we often don't get to talk about or think about when we're recruiting. So there's something about Teams or Zoom, as we are now, A couple of things. One, you're all listening to me, I hope. You have no choice in one sense, because I have the room. In an interview with 7 or 8 people on a panel, the body language, eye contact, twitching, cups of coffee, room sounds, emails going, texts, the distraction that live events create, we crave, of course we do, it's part of life. But think in an interview situation, how focused we are, how courteous we are, how we offer everybody a chance to speak. So those people that don't speak up are asked and offered an opportunity. I have never seen such poor and excellent chairing in my life. There'll be a small book coming out later. I think we all should think about and pause and reflect on how, when we're together physically, we have conscious and unconscious bias, whether we like it or not. But actually, in a Zoom, in a team, on a call, we're focused on the individual's content, their clarity, and the words and contribution they're making. And after all, isn't that what we should be doing, to make discernments about people's abilities and capabilities and their culture, their values, and their behaviours? And I think it focuses the mind. I'm not saying that we will carry on doing this. I think many clients, and indeed as a recruiter, I welcome the day we are able to shake a hand or give a hug to a celebratory candidate after they've been appointed. But I think there are some really interesting lessons for us to learn about how that clarity and focus and objectivity, we've all moved to unnamed applications, but actually the process, the immediacy of that process starts to bring unconscious bias. And I would just ask us to think about the lessons we've learned in lockdown, because we are focusing on content, we're focusing on what we hear, not just what we see, and we are taking people at face value through a screen. And members said to me last week on a panel I was doing, that was hard work, Julie, and I said, it should be. If we're not listening for an hour, if we're not considering, if we're not assessing for an hour, we're not really doing our job as hiring managers properly. I think members and officers are realising the importance and intensity of listening, truly listening to what people are saying. So I think there are way more positives for the diversity and inclusion agenda. And I think members and officers are seeing the benefits of that. That's not to say I don't welcome a return also to the chance to see people in a room as part of the process. But I think we are very much now moving to a point where online or virtual recruitment will definitely be a big part of how we lead up to some of those sort of face-to-face live sessions. So I'll stop there, Leitham, so we can take any questions.
Great, thanks Kris and Julie, some really brilliant insights, and I'm sure that we could go on for a lot longer, just exploring and talking about it. There was a point raised by Martine in terms of availability of research, and Kris, you have answered that with the link to a website, so thanks. So if you haven't seen that and you're listening to onto the call, it's worth checking that out. And Joanne Kumper again raises that point in terms of the impact this kind of transition of utilizing technology is having on the recruitment process, and the benefits that it's bringing. I just wondered, in terms of the work that you've been doing to date, Julie, what kind of prep training have you done for leaders and members in terms of tuning in, honing in their skills? Because as you say, it's a really it is a very difficult task that they've got to do. It's really powerful in terms of this transition. What have you been doing to help people?
It's a good point, Leitham. I mean, I suppose the obvious things around technology training, a lot of IT teams are doing, but I think doing everything we do at the moment is done in slithers of time rather than days, which is quite different. So we're doing advanced log-ons, checking sound, checking visual, checking that the background is appropriate. Kris rightly says some people are really having to work out of their bedrooms, with a community around them. So we're checking that it's appropriate, that it doesn't distract, that the member or the officer is able to concentrate. We're obviously suggesting to people, if their video in is not helpful, then to video out and just stay with the voice call, because what we hear is important. And just running checks with members. So we've been running complete sort of run-throughs of practice sessions, running the interview, asking the questions. We've done some extra work with chairs. I think, you know, there are some really good chairs out there in live world, and there are some really terrible chairs. That's the same online. But of course, as a chair, you're looking for eye contact, you're looking for a hand. What are the new signals? What are the new ways of working? We've also been briefing candidates. I was doing a prep session yesterday with a candidate where we had a great discussion about whether to wear a tie or not. It was a gentleman. And I said, would you wear a tie if you were going live? And he said, yes. I said, well, wear the tie. Other people have said, I'm sitting in my bedroom, I don't feel comfortable in my suit. And so we've talked about authenticity, and we've talked about impact that people want to make. The advantage for a candidate is that once the floor is handed to them, they have the floor. The danger of that is that they go on too long. So we've been doing some timings on succinctness, and how to manage the time when you're looking at a screen rather than having a clock in front of you. So getting tools and tasks around. It's actually helped candidates because they've been able to have notes with them, Letha. I think, you know, the days of the notes, I always advocate candidates to take notes in with them. People sometimes feel it's like a trick. You know, if I've got no notes, I look better. That's rubbish. Notes are about preparation. So candidates be able to have notes in front of them and work the room. So a lot of technology practice. We're running some development sessions online for Homes England, and I was on a practice yesterday for a team exercise on Teams, where we're inviting colleagues from around the organisation to come together and run a team exercise remotely themselves, supervised by Penna associates. And we did a practice, and we got people online, we checked how they felt, we introduced them to each other, we had a coffee. And so lots more prep, lots more informal checking. And obviously we're supervising our own interviews with clients, so we're acting as moderator where needed. For example, yesterday I was running a text line with the chair of a panel who was wanting to ask me some questions as we went live, just to check that she was okay with things. So keeping another form of channel of communication open. And the worst case scenario, last week we had an interview collapse. We had the technology collapse 20 minutes in on a Teams. We tried to reboot, we couldn't. We rang the candidate and we rang the panel, and they all agreed to stay late that evening and run the interview again.
Great.
Yeah. You have to have plan B ready, you have to have backup platforms ready, and you must practice. We've also been sending scripted sheets out to clients and candidates about do's and don'ts, just to give them some top tips. And as I say, lots of practice and preparation. And just what happens is, Letha, I mean, you can imagine this, people either feel too comfortable as a candidate, they're a bit sort of relaxed and, oh, you know, just pop back in from the garden, or they're sitting looking down the screen at me because they're so intense. So just a bit of body language prep and just being clear with people and making them comfortable, telling them not to worry if the dog barks. It's actually broke the ice a few times when a toddler's come in and joined the interview. They've been really good, actually. They've got the job. So just realising we're recruiting human beings and being human beings ourselves. Yeah,
that's great. Great points. And I was on a panel last week myself, and it was interesting. We had a balance between some people who were connecting via video and sound, and others who were purely tuning in through sound. And that kind of sensory difference, you know, the intensity, as you say, that you can pick up, you know, really having to listen versus also being able to watch and observe. You know, it was quite an interesting bit of feedback. There's a question that's been, sorry, there's a question that's been raised in terms of what training is out there for candidates in terms of supporting them, you know, in terms of coming across well on video. Anything that you're aware of that you can point in the direction of?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot, actually, and I was talking to colleagues this morning at Penna, and it's something we should write up. So we've been doing sort of one-to-one coaching to help people with their both visible presence and also how to feel relaxed and comfortable in there. So do you stand up when you're presenting? Do you use sound and video? I had a client a few weeks ago who, if you think about it, for some candidates, being on the video is actually quite daunting. So we gave candidates the option, but what we asked them to do was prepare a 5-minute video recording and send that in so we could imagine them, we could feel them in the room. So I think our jobs at Penna is to understand what the client needs and what the candidate needs to make that bridge in terms of communication. So I think training for candidates is about preparation. Definitely could share some notes that we've been using with candidates to prepare them. And if people want to have a session with us separately, give us a call.
Cool.
One of its basic good practice that we would do if we were doing it normally. But I think when we go on video, a lot of best practice gets forgotten, but actually a lot of it is still very relevant. Great one last week, a bit of a nugget for you. So I had a member panel who kept muting and not unmuting. And the poor candidate halfway through had probably had about 7 questions, mute, unmute. And he had to keep interrupting and saying, I'm really sorry, counsellor, but I can't hear you. And throughout, I saw him yesterday and I said, I don't know how you did that. So again, just reminding them that they may need to manage the panel, and rather than being sort of adult child, we need to be in adult mode and be able to say to the counsellors particularly, I'm really sorry, you're on mute, could you repeat the question? Or I'm sorry, that was a distraction, I can hear a drill behind you, do you mind muting out? Diplomacy and courtesy, you know, really are needed through that. So a little bit of training about helping them manage the programme.
Yeah, we're also going to have, as one of our future lunch and learn time sessions, a whole feature around that in terms of, you know, being able, you know, tools, techniques and skills required. And we've got, yeah, a colleague coming in to share that. So I'm looking forward to it. Kris, we've got a question from you in terms of, did any of the companies discuss how they've checked in with their teams in a genuine way over lockdown, and where how are you can sound less and less sincere? Anything that you can share?
Kris is on mute.
Oh, let's unmute. So let's have another go.
Letha, I'll just cover a little bit of that in case Kris.
Oh, I think it might be here.
There we go.
Yeah, there we are.
Yeah, there we are. It was like from me to you then. So it's a great question, and I think, you know, when this first started, it was a bit unusual for us, wasn't it? And it, you know, it was a bit different. And I think we saw a massive influx of like corporate comms going out all the time, and I think that has tailed off now. Some of the great examples that we saw was like mini pulse surveys. So, you know, how are you doing 2 weeks, 3 weeks on? How are we doing now? And people can submit that anonymously. But I think the relationship between your line manager and their staff is really important. Particularly using weeks like this, like Mental Health Awareness Week. There was a campaign around last year that said, ask twice. So when you say, how is someone, they say, I'm fine, ask again. And, you know, take away that, like to mirror what Julie's saying, take away that sort of authority there, because we are 2 individuals going through something that is really difficult, right? So we want to be able to say openly, you know, I would have no trouble if Julie said to me, how am I doing? I'm having a bad day. I'd say, you know, I'm really struggling at the moment. Can we have a quick chat? And I think that's built with your culture, but we've got to get into that area where this is unique. So keep asking those questions, do pulse surveys to get an anonymous snapshot, and then feedback those results. And just whilst I've got the floor, there was a question about monitoring, and I did, it was on my notes to mention, but it's really important that we do monitor the appointments that we have during this time versus any other time, because like we're seeing, there's so many positive things around this this environment, but we need to ensure that it doesn't detract away from any other areas that we're focusing on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Letha, I'd just add to that as an employer, I think what I'd suggest is some multiple channels as well, because, you know, as the boss asking you how you are too regularly, it can be insincere. A friend asking, a colleague asking, HR asking, I think your ambassadors, your D&I group asking. So I think it's about the multiplicity of concern, because that's the family, as we call it in Penna, it's the family around people. I know that some people would much rather not share that with me, and quite rightly so, but they will share it with, you know, Maggie or Ben or another colleague, because that's what people need. So what I'm missing as a leader is I can't see how people are feeling anymore. I can't see that body language, you know, or to call a conversation. And on a Teams and a Zoom, people might show it, they might not show it. So I think you've got to find different routes in surveys, other people asking, giving people a route through HR, which I always think is invaluable. And actually sometimes people don't want to tell you because it's not important, or they don't want to bother you yet, and they should have that dignity and choice. But culture, of course, is the key platform. If you've created that culture, it allows people to feel comfortable. And let's get the elephant in the Zoom. People are feeling concerned about their jobs. And so asking how are you without talking about how am I based on how I feel about my work, I think is disingenuous. So I think it's the level and the quality of the conversation, and being honest and saying, well, we all feel concerned. I said to my team yesterday, I'm worried. I'm worried about the market, I'm worried about the economy. I'm not going to lie and say I'm not worried. I'm doing something about it best I can, but let's be honest with each other.
Great. I mean, it stimulated a huge amount of traction on our chat space. Thank you so much for all of the comments and questions you posed. We'll keep a copy, and anything that we haven't answered, we'll send out there in connected with the recording. This will be recorded for people to access. Just before you disappear, Kris and Julie, because it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and the theme for us is about kindness. What I wanted to check out with you is any acts of kindness that people have extended to your good selves over the past couple of months during lockdown that you want to share. Kris?
Yeah, I mean, the way to my heart is through my belly, through food. So my partner has been wonderful at buying like build your own burger kits every day, so it comes through the letterbox. So not helping the chin, but certainly helping with with my mental health.
Yeah, I like it. Julie, anything from you? I'm just going to take you off mute. So we'll not ping pong. I'm
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, loads of personal ones. Somebody left me some rhubarb out the back door the other week, and I thought that was a lovely thing, because I'm not a great shopper. I've been whizzing around shopping for my family and forgetting to buy food because I don't normally cook, as my colleagues know. I think the biggest one from a client, and it made me cry, I shared this with my team, was about 2 weeks after lockdown, when one of our largest clients texted and said, don't worry, you know, you're bound to be worrying about the sort of piece of work we've got going on in the fees. They said, just bill us. I can't ask for anything kinder than that. Not because they were going to pay their bill, because because they thought about us. So
all those are people that they know. Yes, Kris.
So I think we've got a little bit of interference. Maybe that's the outer gods telling us our time is up. Thank you so much, Kris and Julie. All of you for tuning in. It's been fantastic. I really appreciate and value your support. Watch out next Tuesday. We've got Osborne Thomas, who are going to be sharing some insights and tips about their experience through lockdown, and we'll keep you posted about future events that are up and coming. Friday night, we've got music and mantra, so hope to see you then. Thanks, everyone, and take care. Lots of love to you all.
thanks, Lethan.
Pleasure.